Hello, so today I'm going to talk about all the tips I wish I'd known before I started jelly printing, because it really makes a difference. So I'm going to show you a basic introduction to how to take a really good print. So here is the jelly plate. I keep it on a piece of paper because otherwise it will stick to everything. And when I'm going to have a printing session, I get some masking tape and tape it to the table so it doesn't move around. You need to treat your plate carefully. You can't use any sharp implements on it because they will make permanent marks. So you want to lay things on and make an impression rather than do any sort of drawing. If you want to do that sort of monoprinting, you can use a piece of acetate. When you're just starting, use copy paper that you just put through the printer. This is recycled and it's quite thin. It's not great quality, but you just want to have something that you're not going to worry about doing lots because it takes a little while to get the hang of it. Also, because it's nice and thin, when you press down with it, it will mould around your shape. You can use any sort of roller or brayer, it doesn't really matter. If you use a foam one, it's going to absorb more paint. These are rubber ones, that's what I like to use. And when you're just starting, although you can use lots of different mediums on the plate, I would stick to acrylic paint until you get the hang of it. And it doesn't really matter what make. These are studio ones, so they're very affordable. One thing you will find is that between the makes and even within a range, you sometimes get different consistency of the paint. So one might be more viscous and one might be slightly thinner. And that's important, because the next thing I want to say is that you want to keep your paint nice and thin on as you roll it out. So my rule is use less paint than you think you're going to, and my other rule is use less pressure with the roller than you think you need. So put a little bit of paint onto your plate, try and distribute it evenly. If it blobs a bit, use the roller to go in a sort of swirl, and then use a very light touch to get an even thin layer. And if you've got too much on a roller, have a piece of roll-off paper at your side that you can use. And what you're aiming for is a thin, even coat. So when you begin, it's going to be thinner than you think, but that will give you the best result. But because it is quite thin, you're going to have to move quickly because it's going to dry quickly, especially if you're printing on a warm day or the room where you're doing it is warm. If you're using plant material, it helps to flatten it just under some books or in a flower press for a day or so. Then more of it will make contact with the plate, giving a better print. So have everything to hand to begin with. If you're going to use plant material, have that at hand. So once you've rolled out your paint on your plate, get your subject, place it on the plate, get your piece of paper, lay your paper on top, and then if you're going to do more than one layer, use some more masking tape and attach that to one edge of your piece of paper. That means when you take it off, you can put it back down again and it will be in the same position. So once you've got your piece of paper down, press firmly, especially if you're using something uneven like plant material, and really press around those edges so you can get as much contact, and you're going to remove as much paint as possible with that first layer. So do it really firmly, and then carefully peel off your piece of paper and see what you've produced. If you like it just like that, that can be your print in itself. You can let your print dry and then you can layer with more jelly printing or other methods on top. I like to do a two-part print where I use another colour, so I need to wait for that first layer to dry. And because it's so thin, it usually dries pretty quickly, but if I want to speed it up, I've got a rubbishy little travel hairdryer and I'll get that out. You don't want to get too much direct heat on your plate, but hold it above, and that, if you're in a hurry or you're impatient, that works really well. And you can tell, after a while, you can tell just by looking at the paint whether it's dry, because it goes from slightly sheeny to a matte finish. And you can always just place a finger on a bit at the edge, and if it comes off clean, then you're ready for your next stage. Especially to begin with, it's a good idea to choose a contrasting colour because then you can see more detail. So you want to put another almost even thinner layer of paint onto your plate next. If you can see a bit of a shadow of your original print through the paint, then that's exactly the right level of thickness that we want. So a really sheer layer. And as I said, if you roll your roller off on a piece of paper after each colour, then you don't have to clean it till the end of your session. Once you've put down that layer, you either put your original paper back, or you could be transferring that print to another sheet. So you put that on and you want to press firmly this time. So give it some good pressure with your hands. And then this is the hard bit because you have to wait for it to completely dry so that it will adhere to the bottom layer. And then you can, when you pull your print, you'll take both of them off. So I like to use a weight, some books, and usually minimum is probably about 5 minutes. So I usually have, that's when it's a good idea to have 2 plates or another project you're doing at the same time. And I think that's, if you've seen other people doing printing, they often edit that bit out because it's boring to watch, but the weighting is really important because, as I say, it needs time to bed down onto the second layer of paint. So after your few minutes is up, and you can leave it longer, you'll only probably get into trouble if you're using very thin paper like tissue paper, and that can make a bit of a mess if you've left it overnight because the paper will start sticking to the plate as well. But most of the time it doesn't matter if you leave it longer. So if you get a phone call or someone comes to the door, you should be fine. So after that, after you've waited, you can pull up one corner just to see if it's coming off cleanly. And if it is, you can carry on and sort of peel it back rather than up. Then you'll get a cleaner result. So I like to use iridescent paint, and that tends to be more watery. So in that case, you'd have to spread it a bit more thinly. And I also like to use matte medium, and that has a more higher water content as well. So I use the medium when I want to transfer a print, but I don't want to add any more colour. To clean your plate in between printing, the easiest way is to use a damp cloth. And I like to use a microfiber cloth for this because its extra surface area really gets all the bits off. But if you've got dried on paint, which can happen sometimes if you've left the plate, I find using some baby oil, and I will just drip it directly onto the plate and use some kitchen towel. And the plate is actually made with mineral oil, so it's quite good for the plate to use baby oil on it. If all else fails, use some very sticky tape. And you just need to practice. Practice makes perfect. And you're using cheap things, you're using copy paper, you're using thin layers of paint. You only need one roller, so you can just keep practicing until you perfect it. And you could be using some plant material, you could be using a stencil, or you could be stamping on it, and it's exactly the same process. But this is just an introduction, and I'll do another video soon where I show you how to do the magazine transfers. Please ask in the comments if there's anything else you need to know. And thank you for watching, and join me for another session soon.